Welcome back to the deep dive. You brought us some really dense material today. We're diving into a very specific corner of prophetic literature.
Absolutely. It's the kind of stuff that, could take months to wade through, usually.
Right.
But if you want a quick grasp on how some researchers are connecting ancient numbers, history, and even modern tech, well, this is the shortcut.
We're looking at sources trying to unlock Daniel's timeline, specifically chapters 12, verses 11-13.
Yeah, using day counts as years. And crucially, hinging it all on the Dome of the Rock's construction date.
Okay, so our mission, as always, is to analyze the source material impartially. We're exploring their claim that this historical date unlocks a precise timeline for, well, pretty major events. Third Temple, Tribulation.
It's quite a mix. You've got numerology, specific historical dates, scriptural interpretation, and they weave it together to make predictions about the near future. The Third Temple, the Tribulation, even the AntiChrist figure.
You have to follow their logic step by step to see how they get there.
Exactly. It's built layer upon layer.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the foundation, the numbers themselves from Daniel. So Daniel 12, verses 11-13, we get these specific day counts, 12,260, 1,290, and 1,335 days. For listeners maybe not familiar, where did these numbers usually fit?
Typically, they're discussed within the framework of the 7-year tribulation period, sometimes called Jacob's trouble.
Right.
And the sources we're looking at define that period as two halves. Each half is 1,260 days long.
Okay, so 12 and 260 days is the base unit, times 2 gives you 2,520 for the whole 7 years.
Exactly. That's the standard duration.
But then Daniel throws in these extra days, 12,290 and 335. How do they fit? Are they extensions?
They are. According to this interpretation, they come after the second 12,260-day period. So you finish the main tribulation, the second half, and you add 30 days. That gets you to 12,290 days. And these researchers link that point to the end of the abomination that makes desolate.
And the 2,335 is the final stop.
Correct. Take that 1,290, add another 45 days, and boom. 1,335. That's the big one. Because Daniel actually says there's a blessing for those who wait and reach that 1,335-day mark.
So the total timeline, if you include these extensions, gets pushed out to 2,595 days.
Precisely. It extends beyond the basic 2,520.
Okay, technical point here.
Yeah.
These are days based on a biblical calendar, right? Like 30-day months. How does that square with our Gregorian calendar? That's always a sticking point.
It is, and this is really crucial to their argument. They acknowledge the counts are based on that 30-day month system.
Yeah.
But they claim trying to convert the months across calendars introduces errors. Their solution, stick purely to the day counts. And apply the day-for-year principle. So 1,260 days becomes 1,260 years. 1,335 days becomes 1,335 years. They argue the calculation sidesteps the calendar month issues.
So the duration itself, the number of days, is the constant that converts to years, not the monthly structure.
Yeah, that's the claim. The day count is the key, converting directly to a year count. It's their way around a complex dating problem, assuming you accept the day-for-year idea in the first place.
All right, we have the numbers, the blueprint. Now we need the anchor point in history. And these researchers point directly at the Dome of the Rock, the door.
Yes, they call it the time marker, the placeholder. It's the fixed point they need to connect ancient prophecy to, well, our times.
And the history there is pretty specific. Commissioned by Caliph Abd-al-Malik.
Right. Construction started around 685 AD, finished up in 691 AD. That 7-year window is important to them, too.
Okay, but before the math, the location. This theory depends on a very specific and honestly quite controversial view of the Temple Mount layout.
It really does. They explicitly state the Dome of the Rock is not built over the original Holy of Holies from Solomon's or Herod's temple.
Which is counter to the common assumption.
Very much so. They follow what's called the northern location theory.
Northern location.
Yeah. They use various sources, even things like triangulation based on star alignments, like Orion, to argue the Holy of Holies was actually further north.
Where specifically?
Near the current Dome of the Tablets, or Dome of the Spirits. That's where they pinpoint the sacred center.
Okay, so if the door isn't on the temple site itself, why is its construction date the big prophetic key?
Because its location still matters. They see it as being within the outer court, the part the Bible says was given to the Gentiles. But more than location, it's the function and the inscriptions on the dome itself.
Ah, the inscriptions. Tell us about that. How does a 7th century building connect to the AntiChrist concept?
Okay, so first they define it as a Muslim shrine, technically not a mosque. and they label it AntiChrist, specifically because of the Arabic text running around the outside.
What does it say?
Critically, it explicitly denies that Jesus is the Son of God, and they link that denial directly to verses in the Gospel of John that define the spirit of the Antichrist. So for them, the construction of this building, with that specific message, marks the establishment of an anti-messianic presence right there on the Mount. That's why its timeline becomes prophetically charged.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We take those day counts, 12,260 and 335, turn them into years, and launch them from the Dome of the Rack timeline.
Exactly. This is the core calculation. The day-for-a-year rule applied to that historical anchor. This is where, their theory lives or dies based on whether their results align with history.
So calculation 1. They use the 12,260 years, but the starting point. It's not 685, the start of construction, or 691 at the end. They use 688 AD. Why the middle?
Good question. They see the 7-year construction, 685, 691, as a kind of prophetic week. 688 AD is the exact midpoint of that 7-year span.
The midst of the week, like in Daniel's prophecy about the tribulation.
That seems to be the parallel they're drawing, yes. So you take 688 AD, add 260 years, and where does that land you?
1948 AD.
Bingo. 1948, the year the modern state of Israel is declared.
And that connection, 688 plus 12,260 equals 1948, is presented as the major validation for this whole day-year system.
It's huge for them. It's the historical proof of concept. A medieval Islamic shrine's midpoint predicting the rebirth of Israel, if that pattern holds.
Then the other number, 1,335, should also yield something significant.
That's the argument. If 12,260 worked, 1,335 must point to the final blessing.
Okay, calculation 2. The 3,335 years. Now, the starting point shifts. They don't use 688 AD this time. They use 690 AD. Why the change?
Right, it's a different anchor point. Their reasoning, as presented in the source, is that 690 AD represents the year the structure was basically finished, even though the absolute final touches might have gone into 691. They see 690 as the year it stood, effectively.
So 690 AD plus 1,335 years.
Add them up and you get 2025 AD.
2025, meaning the blessing period associated with Daniel's 1,335 days points towards the year starting in 2025, effectively making 2026 the year of fulfillment.
Yes. The year 2026 becomes the target year for that promised blessing for the rest, the rising Daniel was told about.
And if 2026 is the end point or the start of the blessing after the tribulation, that puts immense pressure on the timeline for the tribulation itself. It has to happen soon.
Very soon. It forces the entire 7-year tribulation period into the immediate future to line up with that 2026 anchor.
Okay, let's dig into that predicted tribulation. How do these sources say it begins? Often it's linked to a peace treaty, the covenant with many.
But that's another area where this interpretation differs significantly from, say, more common views.
How so?
They argue the covenant with the many isn't a political treaty signed by the Antichrist. Instead, they believe it refers to the Jewish people reinstituting the law of Moses.
The law itself is the covenant.
Yes. So the trigger for the 7-year tribulation isn't a signature on a document. It's a specific ritual act.
It is.
The moment the first daily sacrifice is offered on a rebuilt Third Temple altar. That act, they claim, starts the clock on the final 7 years.
That's a major departure. What about the midpoint event, the Abomination of Desolation? Traditionally, maybe a statue.
Well, they give it a very 21st century twist. Forget a simple statue of a ruler.
Right.
They propose the abomination will be some kind of AI idol, an artificial intelligence that has reached technological singularity.
An AI idol. Seriously, how does that fit the prophecy?
Their rationale connects to the description of the image speaking, demanding worship, seemingly having its own intelligence. They see AI singularity as the only plausible mechanism for an inanimate object to be given life or quickened in a way that could mimic the prophecy, especially the speaking part.
That's definitely thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Connecting ancient texts to cutting edge, even future tech.
It grounds the prophecy in current fears and possibilities, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Okay, let's tie this back to the dates. If 2026 is linked to the blessing after the tribulation, how do they map out the 7 years leading up to it?
The math becomes very tight. If 2026 holds the significance of the 1,335-day endpoint, or the start of the blessing right after, then the midpoint of the tribulation, the moment the daily sacrifices are stopped, has to land exactly 12,260 days before that blessing period begins.
Okay.
And when they run that calculation backwards from the 2026 marker, it places that midpoint event, the stopping of the sacrifice, right around Passover season in 2030.
Passover 2030 is the midpoint. So to find the start of the tribulation, you just count back 12,260 days from Passover 2030.
Exactly. Work backwards 1,260 days from that spring 2030 date.
And where does that land?
According to the precise calculations in this source material, October 30th, 2026.
Wow, that's specific. October 30th, 2026 is the day the first sacrifice is offered and the 7-year clock starts ticking.
That's the level of granularity they believe Daniel's numbers provide when anchored correctly.
Now, one more piece. For those who believe in a rapture event before the tribulation starts, where does that fit? If the tribulation starts October 30, 2026.
Right. This interpretation does adhere to a pre-tribulation rapture model. So the event has to happen sometime before that October 30th date.
Do they pinpoint it?
They delve into Old Testament typologies. Specifically, they focus on agricultural cycles, harvest themes, and they connect it very strongly to the story of Boaz and Ruth.
Boaz and Ruth. How?
They see Boaz as a type of Christ, the kinsman redeemer, and Ruth, the Gentile, as representing the church, the bride. The timing of their interaction during the harvest season is seen as key.
Okay.
They link this typology specifically to the Feast of New Wine, which isn't one of the main mandated feasts, but has historical roots.
And does the Feast of New Wine yield a specific date?
It does. In their analysis, they suggest a date around July 23rd.
July 23rd. So a midsummer rapture, roughly 3 months before their predicted tribulation start date in late October 2026.
That's the timeline they construct based on integrating these various threads, the day counts, the door anchor, the typologies.
This has been quite the journey. We went from ancient Daniel to a 7th century building in Jerusalem through some intense data-year math, landing on very specific timeline. 2026 for the start, 2030 for the midpoint, involving AI idols and connecting back to 1948. It's intricate.
It really is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what's striking isn't just the math, it's the underlying promise. They're not just mapping disaster, they're mapping a path towards what Daniel was promised.
Which comes back to that 1,335 days, the blessed period.
Exactly. The source material emphasizes the 5 elements promised to Daniel for reaching that point. The blessing itself, a time of rest, receiving his inheritance, and even his own rising, likely meaning resurrection.
So the timeline isn't just a warning. It's presented as a guide to achieving that ultimate reward.
That seems to be the implication, that understanding and navigating this timeline is key to participating in that final blessing.
The researchers proposing this certainly believe they've found a coherent system. It ties together history, scripture, numbers, even technology in a very specific way.
It definitely requires accepting several quite bold assumptions up front, the day-for-a-year rule being primary, the Northern Temple location, the specific interpretation of the covenant. But if you grant those premises...
The calculations do follow logically to these precise dates.
They do. The internal consistency is there, given the starting points.
Okay, to wrap up this deep dive, let's leave our listener with that final provocative thought from these sources. Daniel 12.30 tells Daniel he will rest and will arise to his inheritance at the end of the days. These authors connect that rising to another verse nearby about those who shine like the stars for turning many to righteousness. So the final thought is, what do these sources imply is the real inheritance waiting at the end of that 300 and 335-day count? Is it just about survival, or is it about actively participating in something cosmic, perhaps, by understanding and sharing this timeline? What does it mean to shine like the stars in this context?